It's MLB draft time here in our Colorado Rockies draft-only franchise. It is our second draft of the series. Last year we picked number 3. This year back in the top 5, but with the number 4 selection. Now, with this draft, we have a few players that we've scouted that we like here on the board. I will say, just due to a little bit of struggle with discovery this year, my board isn't quite as deep as the one we saw last year. However, I still think there are really solid options, particularly at the 4 spot. I think the top of this class is strong, starting with Richie Covey, who will be a generational prospect. Now, I know the ratings you're seeing in front of you don't make it seem like he will, but he is. The reason we know that is just some of the clues that I've hinted at in earlier episodes, as well as in my scouting tips and tricks video. He's going to be generational. And so if he's available at 4, it's an obvious pick. Much like last year, there is an obvious guy at the number 1 spot. If he does not make it, there is kind of a debate for a tier below of a few guys that I think of very similarly. Unlike last year, where I thought Rafael Murillo had a really good chance to be there at 3, I think Richie Covey dropping to 4 is really a toss-up, so we have to be prepared for him not making it, and I think I am. There are 4 players that I would consider strong candidates at the number 4 spot. Russell Aaron's pretty close, but just talking about these guys, I think the best pitcher here in the class would be a good selection for us. In my opinion, it is Jose Barreto. I just think this solid all-around skill set, the age, the pitch mix isn't great, but he projects to, get in the mid-90s with his fastball, which is good enough. Just an overall lack of weakness in his game, and just the rating spread I'm seeing here makes me very confident he'll be a potential. Dwayne Perry is somebody that I think will be also very, very good. His control won't be the best. Hits per 9 might be a little low, but probably not enough to really be a problem for him. Also comes with a 4-pitch mix, 2-seam changeup, slider, and the curve. His spread here just makes me a little bit more worried that he might end up with high B potential. If he ends up in the 70s overall, he'll have that A potential. Just, betting on a guy being in the 70s overall is a risky game to play. So I feel like Jose Barreto is a little bit safer while also still having the same amount of upside as Perry. So Byron Lowe, I think in normal drafts would be very worthy of being the best pitcher in the class. I think it's just a really big top 3 at the pitcher position. He does have, I think, the best pitch mix of these guys. I'll give him that. But low hits per 9, strikeouts per 9, I think just make him a little bit less appealing to me than the other guys. But all 3 of these guys would be excellent. The one position player that we could have our eye on, should Covey not fall, would be Jason Lindsay. He is a player that offers almost everything you want out of as a position player. He's not going to give you power at all, but he's the guy that could be a really good center fielder of the future and also hit for high average, get on base a lot, and give you pretty much everything else. Is that skill set, more valuable than these 3 guys who I do genuinely believe can be future aces? We'll find out soon once we get to that 4 overall pick, if Covey is off the board. Now, our next pick is at number 42. There's a few guys that I would absolutely consider taking here. You have to have a little bit wider of a board once you get past the top 10. So with our 42 pick, I think if we luck out and Russell Aaron is still there, I would absolutely love to take him. How likely is it? Seeing as how his MLB rank is 41 and anyone who scouted him probably has him higher than that, very unlikely. But he's kind of circled in as my number 1 target for pick 42 should he drop. We did discover a couple of players here. Alberto Lopez, who projects to be a good offensive player. He's going to be able to hit righties well, going to have a strong arm as well. Could play right field as well as first base. And then Raymond Park, who we scouted up to 55%. He looks maybe a little bit more of a long-term project, but can hit power versus righties. He's going to have solid vision, though the discipline won't quite be there. And then just a solid defender, but he's going to have a little bit of a ways to go. I imagine he'll be the low 60s overall, maybe even high 50s. Luis Perez would need to fall a little bit, but another switch hitter here who could be an excellent fielder with some good speed as well. These guys, you know, they're not great, but they're solid, and that's why we're thinking of them at 42 and not at number 4. And then Paul Naylor is the last one. Likely to have contact versus left in the 80s right off the bat is really good. Fielding is going to be in the 80s as well. Plate skills will be there. Another guy that's not really going to offer power, not going to have much of an arm. So where will he play? He can play first, third, and left. We'll have to see what would be his best spot should we draft him. And then there are a few pitchers that I would absolutely love to take at 42. Antone Hernandez, gonna throw absolute gas. Gonna have maybe a little bit further away to go than the guys that we're looking at 4. But a 5-pitch mix here and no super bad weaknesses. His per 9 will be a problem though. Herb Reyes, that 87 to 97 potential range looks really good. Likely to come in at the low 60s overall. High walks per 9, decent stamina, decent velocity. Just the 3-pitch mix though. He is a lefty, which you like to see. Hits per 9 really low. And then Matthew Marlin, who I think is probably the best of these pitchers. The problem is, and it's not showing it here, he is injured. So if you draft Matthew Marlin, you are banking on the fact that he will not get injured. His injury will not impact his ratings. It actually does show injured. It's just my face is covering it. If you see on the lower left, doctor exam injured. So they don't always affect the ratings when they're injured, but they oftentimes do. So do you want to take that risk with a guy like Matthew Marlin? Then somebody we're probably not looking at until our picks in the 70s would be a guy like Benjamin Barrett, who offers decent contact, a strong arm in the outfield switch hitter. So not nearly as fleshed out of a board. I didn't put everybody that I had scouted on my board here. But once we get to that part of the draft where we're later on, we'll put them on again. Just not as many super high caliber options for later in the draft, unfortunately. Just with the lack of discovery. This was probably the least good discovery class I've ever had. Like one pitcher in the top 50 MLB rank out of discovery is by far the lowest. I usually get multiple. And so really weird year, for discovery. And I think it's going to impact how deep our class is. But regardless, I've done about everything I can to prepare you for what I've got for this draft class. It's time to officially hop in and start it. The number one question is, will generational third base prospect Richie Covey fall to the Colorado Rockies at pick 4? Let's get things started with the Oakland Athletics, and with the number 1 pick in the draft, they will take Richie Covey. He doesn't even get close to our pick. He goes where he should at number 1 overall. Absolutely the right pick. So unfortunately, we will not be adding a generational talent to the team this year. Covey is going to be a really big time hitter for the Athletics. They got themselves a stud. Number 2 pick in the class, the Angels select Julian Cisneros. So the number 1 and number 2 players on the MLB board are off the board. Cisneros, going to be a very solid player. Not going to have quite the upside you probably want at number 2, but going to come in. He's going to have a good overall that he'll be able to make an impact early, and he's going to have the potential in the Bs, which is, good starter. So maybe going for the safe pick there at number 2. And then at number 3, Thomas Kuiler. I don't know how to pronounce that last name. Somebody we did not scout. MLB rank 49. Just was not in one of the areas that we ended up scouting. Could be good, though, for sure. So that puts us up here at number 4. And, you know, the surefire number 1 pick for us is off the board. So it's time to debate between our other 4 guys that I have a top 4 grade on in this class. To me, it's honestly between Barreto and Jason Lindsay here. I think Barreto's my favorite pitcher. Lindsay's my favorite position player. If you look at the next pick, 42 for this team, it is filled, I think, with guys that are going to be pitchers, I think, are the best probable remaining guys available. One of these 3, I think, will be there. Marlon is, of course, an injury risk, but if we can get one of these 2 guys, I think they'll be the 2 best players available. Unless Russell Aaron, he's, I think, the best possible player for that. So if you want a good position player, Jason Lindsay's our best shot at getting one. However, I think in this franchise series, we are farther ahead in the position players than we are the pitchers. One of the, I think, mistakes that I made in the Chicago White Sox draft only franchise is I just didn't really take pitcher in the first round until too late in the franchise. And the pitchers were just so far behind the position players that we didn't win a championship there. So I'm going to, at pick number 4, select who is, in my mind, the best pitcher in the draft. So with the number 4 overall selection in the MLB draft, the Colorado Rockies select Jose Barreto, starting pitcher, 18 years old, coming out of high school. And I think we got ourselves somebody that's going to contend with Dolander for future ace. Might even come in and be the new favorite for that spot. Just a good overall set of ranges, I think, on this guy. Chris Medeiros here. Gonna have high B potential. Gonna be a good player. A little bit older, but I think a good pick there for the White Sox. Jason Lindsay goes inside the division at number 6 to the San Francisco Giants. My favorite position player after Covey in this class. And we're going to see him in this franchise. Russell Aaron goes all the way at number 7. So even before we had him ranked. So he had never had even a remote chance of making it to us at 42. A good offensive player. I just didn't like his defense enough to pick him at number 4. But at number 7, I think that's good value. I think he was the best position player on the board. So if Detroit didn't want pitching, I can see why they would take this player. So far, the other pitchers that I really liked are both still on the board. There's no chance they're going to make it all the way to our next pick, although that would be insane. But does one of them go to the division again is the question here. The Padres on the clock. They go with Steve Cruz. Now, he was the first position player that I identified that I liked here in the class. Steve Cruz, really big power. The question with him is, as he's injured, will his ratings hold? Rodriguez we had as the number 3 player in the class. Just didn't like him as much as the other pitchers that were ranked around him because he just doesn't really throw that hard. Not that throwing hard is everything, but if it can be a tiebreaker, I'm going to let it be a tiebreaker. Sanchez, switch hitting guy, big arm for the Pirates. Luis Perez was on our board, one of the options maybe at 42 should he fall. Wasn't my favorite option, so I'm not super sad that he came off the board, but I think at least a solid pick here for Seattle. And then Dwayne Perry right after that, the 10th overall player, falls to 20. I think the Phillies got an absolute steal. The number 1 ranked player by our scouts in this class. My personal number 3 ranked player, and just at 20. I mean, how did all these guys pass on him? He was ranked MLB 10, and if you scouted him, you probably ended up with him higher. So I don't know how he fell, but congrats to Philly. Matthew Marlin goes to the Yankees, so we'll not be able to see whether he could be a high-risk pick for us. I think he was the best available pitcher. Just like with Cruz, though, will the injury impact his ratings? And then Alberto Lopez here to Houston at 28. Dang, that is unfortunate for us. I think he was the most interesting position player available, but that's the risk you take. When you take a pitcher in the first round, you risk just not getting a good position player in the class. So probably going to be a pitcher heavy class for us this year, but I think we need it. I think our pitching once again is further behind than our hitting right now. Still a couple of players that are interesting. Park and Naylor I think would both be good options. I think I'd like them better in the 70s than with our pick in the 40s, especially with a couple of pitchers still on the board that I really, really like. And as soon as you leave the first round, that's when relievers really start flying off the board. We see reliever, reliever. Every pick except for Reagan, who looks like a pretty solid pick for the Twins, at least potentially, has been reliever. And then we get a position player here. But if you like the high-end relievers in a class, this is the range you got to take them. No other major players on our board were taken here before 42. So we've got kind of a 4-player mix that we're looking at for players to draft here. Raymond Park, Paul Naylor, Antone Hernandez, and Herb Reyes. I gotta say, even though we may not end up with a position player that we like in this class at all, should we not take one here? I just think the caliber of the pitching is better than the caliber of the position players, and we're still really early on in the franchise, so I'm just going to take the best player available no matter the position. So I think it's really between Hernandez here and Herb Reyes. Reyes is a lefty, so that's interesting. He's also ranked by MLB, so there's a chance Hernandez just wasn't, discovered by anybody else, and he could be available with one of the picks in the 70s. Do we want to take that risk for a player that I like a little bit better? Or do we play it safe and just take the guy that I like better now? That would pretty much guarantee we don't get Reyes. We don't get both of them, and we'd be banking on one of these 3 position players making it to the 70s. Pretty tough decision here, I must say. Both guys, I think, would fit what we're looking for really well. Reyes, though, that hits per 9 is looking really bad. Not a strength for Hernandez either, but it looks very dangerous here for Herb Reyes. 3-pitch mix. 2 seams are going to come anywhere in those mid 90s. We don't have a lefty, though. This is actually tough. I like these players pretty much the exact same amount. With the number 42 pick in the MLB draft, the Colorado Rockies will select Herb Reyes, 21-year-old. And it's all upside with him. 87 to 97 potential. Likely going to be in that low 60s overall. But ultimately, I went with it hoping that Antone Hernandez can last until the 70. He's not ranked. And we need a little bit of luck in this class for it to be good. So we're taking a risk, trying to end up with a better class overall. Let's see if it pays off. Here at 74, and the risk pays off. Hernandez is still on the board, as is Raymond Park. We did lose out on our first base discovery guy. Where did he go? Right here, 59. So the Astros were looking for some first basemen. They took both of our discovery first basemen here in this class. I don't know if Naylor really fits a first base role, maybe more third or left, and then they can have Reyes play that first base spot, who they took in round, or Lopez, excuse me. So I think here we take Hernandez. Hernandez is just better than Park. There's only a few picks, and I just think Park's probably going to make it these next few picks. And there you have it. Number 11 player off the board at 74 for the Colorado Rockies. You send to this next pick. Raymond Park is still there, so the risk pays off. We get a position player that is at least solid. I don't know if Raymond Park is going to be a stud, but it gives us a switch hitter. It gives us an 18-year-old that I think will have plenty of room to grow. I don't think he's going to be very close to MLB ready, so that's why I was looking at him more in the 70s range than in the 40s range. Here at 108, Benjamin Barrett is still on the board, but I do want to look here at the pitching just to see if there's anybody I like as well. I think this guy's terrible, the guy that we have ranked 33. We didn't scout him, that's why. Rich Hayes here could be somebody that we take to just say, let's get somebody with upside. I think that could be a good guy just to get as maybe a trade piece, right? I don't know if he's going to be a pick for us to use so much as to trade, or we could keep him and let him develop. But I think we're going to go Rich Hayes here over Barrett. I just don't really like what I see from Barrett, but I'll take him in the 5th should he still be there. And he is, so that would take him. Benjamin Barrett to get somebody for the outfield in the squad. And then with our last pick, we're going reliever hunting. We got a couple of discovery guys here. Walker's going to have a high overall, but he's going to regress once he hits the professional league. So I think McCracken is a better option for us here. And that's who we'll take with our final selection in the MLB draft. And ultimately, you know, very pitcher heavy at the top. I think we needed a draft like this early, though. You got to get some people developing at pitching because not everybody you draft is going to be a hit at pitcher. So we can get a lot of swings at the bat here early on in the franchise. I think it's going to pay out for us in a big way. When it comes to signing this draft, we should not have a problem. We've got a lot of high interest here. We get a decline on our first guy, unfortunately, but we get Hernandez to join up and Barreto to join up. We're going to try for a couple more guys. We got another signee. Hayes signs up, and we might have pretty much everybody we need right off the rip. So there you have it. We might get this done next period. Everybody's here at least 55% now. We get Benjamin Barrett on board. We get McCracken on board. And we get Herb Reyes on board, not Hayes. So there you have it. Took us just 2 periods to sign our entire class. You got to love that. No major trades made at the deadline. We weren't going to make any ourselves, of course. So it is time to take a look at the draft class here to wrap up the draft episode. And oh my goodness, things are looking pretty good for us once again. Jose Barreto has 99 potential. That wasn't even part of his range. He ends up 1 above his range because his range had 73 as his max overall and 98 as his max potential. He goes above that here for us. An absolute slam dunk selection for the Rockies. I was preparing myself to not be super stoked about the draft that we got, but how can you not love missing on a generational player and still getting 99 potential anyway? That's incredible here. Strikeouts per 9 is his lowest per 9 at 49. I mean, That's not going to be too much of a problem. This guy already 74 overall. Not going to take long to make it to the majors. Going to have a mid-90s fastball like we already knew. Curveball at 80, changeup at 84. You got to love Jose Barreto. I feel like I want to add one pitch because his fastball, curveball, changeup just kind of boring, you know? We'll make it so his control on it isn't great if we do add one, but I feel like we want to add a little bit of excitement to that pitch mix. Herb Reyes, 63 overall, 93 potential. With 83 velocity, only has a 92-mile two-seam, huh? That was the very low end of his range, which is annoying. His two-seam said 92 to 97. So while all of his ratings came up closer to the high end of what they were projected to be, right? He had 87 and 97 potential. That's high end of it. His actual velocities ended up terrible. Hits per 9 at 24 is going to need a lot of work with this player. But we got ourselves a couple of guys that I think are going to be major factors in this franchise at the starting pitcher spot. Anton Hernandez, only B potential, but my goodness, 99 velocity. All right. Okay. 95 stamina. Hits per 9 low again. Well, his just per 9s need help in general. He's going to be a little bit, I think, take a little bit longer. I feel like if you get 99 velocity, you have to be able to throw 100 miles an hour, though. So I'll probably make it that. Like I don't like changing velocities too much because now you can see the ranges on these players. So you know what you're getting yourself into. But with 99 velocity, literally max velocity, you're going to tell me this guy can't hit 100 miles an hour? We're changing that. Raymond Park here, only 57 overall with 86 potential. This is honestly kind of where I was expecting from him. I just didn't see a player card that felt like it was going to be incredible. He's a very long-term project. Maybe ends up being a trade piece for us. Same can be said of Rich Hayes, 55 overall, 91 potential. Most likely a guy we trade, or we could just let him develop for the next few years, and once the team starts getting expensive, he'll probably be ready to maybe join the squad. It'll take him 4 or 5 years, though, so maybe we trade him instead. Benjamin Barrett sucks. That's why I waited till as long as I could to draft him. I just didn't like what I was seeing there. And got a strong arm, so good on him to have that. Well, that's a miss. And then 60 overall with 80 potential in the 6th round for a reliever. I'm taking that all day. I'm taking that all day long. Could be a multi-inning reliever as well with 41 stamina. Ultimately, you got to be happy with this draft, I think. I knew we were going to be able to get good players with our first 2 picks, and we absolutely did. Herb Reyes just doesn't throw as hard as I wish he did. Other than that, I like the player. 65 durability is okay. 77 from Barreto. Antoine is in the 80s, right? If I remember. Yes, he is. I mean, his overall is being propped up by the fact he has 95 stamina, which is why I think he's a longer project than Reyes, even though the difference of overall is just 1. Just a lot of long-term projects after that. Guys with upside for sure to eventually become something, whether we trade them or we wait for them to develop. And then a reliever that will probably factor in this franchise. Benjamin Barrett's probably the only person here that's not going to give us any value in this franchise. These guys, maybe we could package the 2 of them, find somebody we like in this class and trade for them, or we could wait a couple of years, do it later, because they're both pretty young, so they'll hold value as prospects for a little while. But I think we got ourselves a really good class here, and let's look around the division, see what our rivals got. The Dodgers didn't really get anything to be excited about. Let's go back and see the Diamondbacks. They also didn't have much. Was McHugh injured? I felt like he was better than this. He might have gotten injured. And his ratings nerfed. Steve Cruz was injured and did not get his ratings nerfed here for the Padres. They got themselves a really good power hitter. All right, with a pretty decent arm. Future Manny Machado replacement. Excellent pick here by the Padres. And then a reliever who will take a long time to develop but has some upside. This reliever, 40-68 overall. Not going to improve a ton, but he's good. And then Jason Lindsay here for the San Francisco Giants. Almost drafted him. I was very tempted to, just because I felt like it was our only chance to get a real difference maker at the position. Player spot was at 4. And he looks good. 73 overall with 93 potential. Now, something to keep in mind in this series is when I'm going through these draft classes, we have 3 trades. We've already used 1, right? But we have 2 more trades to use in this franchise. So a lot of these draft classes, we find somebody that we really like the skill set. It feels like it's a skill set we're missing. We could always add them to a target list for trades. In the case of Lindsay, I would absolutely be adding him to the short list. In fact, I will write his name down just to remember. But I kind of think the fact that he got drafted within the division makes me less likely to trade for him. And I know the one trade we did do was in the division, but that was a totally different ordeal, right? We were giving them a 90 overall 25-year-old, and it was making our division tougher, which is why I made that trade. Whereas the case with Lindsay, I think Lindsay being in the division is tougher. And so if he got drafted by anybody outside of the division, I'd probably be trying to trade for this player. It's more up in the air now that he's in the division. I don't know. I kind of like the idea of somebody that we ended up passing on. We play a bunch throughout the course of this series. Salvatore Morales, another guy. He's going to hit righties really well. So a solid draft here by the Giants. The Giants and the Padres both got themselves guys that I think will be major players here in this series. Jesse Snowden here, 95 potential, but only 55 overall. Rodriguez, a potential pitcher here. He's the guy that just didn't really throw very hard, only 90 miles an hour. But a good player for sure. Eric Morrison's solid, 60 overall. Gonna take him a little while to develop, but 60 isn't terrible. Chris Medeiros, solid pitcher here for the White Sox. Russell Aaron. Okay, this is a good pick. He probably should have been at least in play at 4. Now, the other guys that we've seen that were in play are already in the 70s overall, so he's a little bit behind in that department, but 94 potential. That was the very high end of his range too. I think his max overall was 68 and his max potential was 95. So he was right at the max of his rating. So good pick here by Detroit. Sure. Ungerers and Co. A couple of A potential starters for the Royals. Bell is good. Rufus Guzman, 60 overall with 95 potential. That would have been a good player to get. He went with their 4th pick. I know we had him scouted. He was injured too, but so his injury did not affect his ratings either. I had my eye on him. I just knew he was both old and kind of a long-term project. But at least as a trade piece, for sure. I think we might have been able to draft him instead of the second baseman, but we would have had no position players in this class. Still might have been worth it. Paul Naylor and Alberto Lopez. Thank you to the Houston Astros. It helped us avoid a miss here. He ends up on the lower end of his ratings. He still can be a solid hitter, I think, at the MLB level. Clutch is low. Just doesn't really have the upside to be an impact player. I would have seriously, he was the one position player. Him and Aaron would have been the position players I would have considered at 42. Both were off the board. Aaron would have been great. Lopez would have been a bust. So thank you. Not necessarily a bust. Again, he's fine. Naylor, though, 87 potential, 59 overall. This is the better of the two, for sure. 80 clutch is nice. It's a good pick. Astros did better the second time around. Cisneros is pretty good. Nick Wiley's an awesome closer. He was the only closer ranked by MLB in this entire class. Richie Covey, 80 overall, 99 potential. Sick player, sick player. We know. You guys have seen generational players before. This guy's awesome. Perez is all right. Wouldn't have hated at that 41, but I like what we got better. David Duarte did not end up scouting him. Basically a fielder. Ray Leon is good. He's old though. His home runs per 9 being so low wouldn't play well with Coors Field. His age is high, probably 25 years old when he comes to the league. This is a pretty strong class, though. I've seen a lot of picks that I like, and we haven't even talked about Dwayne Perry, the steal of the first round. The 20th overall pick is 73 overall with 92 potential. I said in order to get a potential, he'd have to be in the 70s, and he ended up in the 70s. Again, that two-seamer ends up on the low end of his range, though. 87 velocity, and your fastest pitch is 92 miles an hour. And his overall is being propped up by stamina, is being in the 90s. But other than control, he looks good. Dwayne Perry was a really good pick. Unsigned here. Byron Rowe, he ends up high B. As high of a B as you can get, but oh man, pitcher clutch is bad with Byron Rowe. Also, I think ends up on the low end of his range. Can we not get every pitcher to end up on the low end of their range, please? My goodness, for their velocity. Everybody's out here throwing low 90s. You know, like, why is MLB afraid to put some guys that throw some heat into the flipping game, man? Cook, pretty good for down the board here in the class, for sure. Don't know if he can ever actually play catcher, but could be a solid hitter. And we're back to our team here. Once again, I think we have the best drafts in the league. And we set up our pitching so that we can really, I think for the next couple of drafts at least, focus on the position players early. You know, if there's a generational pitcher, I'm still going to draft him. But if there's not, we're probably going to be pretty position player heavy. Like if I was offered a similar, after this draft, if I was offered a similar situation next year between good pitchers or Jason Lindsay, now it puts us in a spot where I can feel very comfortable taking maybe a slightly worse player in Lindsay, even though he's insane. Saying he's slightly worse than another prospect is crazy. That's how strong the top of this class was. Because we got a lot of pitchers set up. I think we got 3 guys, maybe 4. Although I think, again, Rich Hayes probably more of a trade candidate that can ultimately pitch for us. And they all have starter level stamina. None of these guys have stamina in the 60s. So they can all actually be starters, which is another plus. But that will wrap up the draft episode of our Colorado Rockies franchise. Let me know what you thought of the class, what maybe you would have done differently if there is anything. But that's all I've got for the episode. We'll be back soon doing some prospect games in August is the current plan. Should be either the day after this episode or 2 days after, but it'll be coming out soon, and I will see you then. Go Rockies.